The night fell heavy on Oakhaven, a city of whispered promises and forgotten corners. That particular night, the rain came down in sheets, cold and unforgiving. It lashed against the windshield of the old, sputtering car Maya Johnson, 18 years old, with eyes full of bright, untamed dreams, was carefully navigating. Oakhaven's east side, where Maya had just left her late-night tutoring session, was swallowed by a silence so profound it felt suffocating. This was a part of the city where the light of justice and concern seldom seemed to shine. A place where black folks fought their way through each day, striving for something preciser, something better. Maya gripped the steering wheel gently. The car, a cherished hand-me-down from her mother, had just had its headlights fixed. A small smile touched her lips as she thought about her future, about the plans bubbling within her, about a brighter tomorrow she yearned for. The yellow traffic light intensified in the distance, signaling an impending change. Maya, ever cautious, eased her foot onto the accelerator, the car rolling slowly through the intersection. The very instant her tires crossed the painted line on the other side, suddenly, a blinding flash of red and blue light exploded in her rearview mirror. The shriek of a police siren tore through the quiet night. A patrol car materialized out of the darkness, accelerated, then swerved sharply, cutting off Maya's car. Maya's heart leaped into her throat. A vague, unsettling feeling washed over her. She hadn't done anything wrong, had she? Her hands remained paw on the steering wheel, the navigation app still open on her phone screen. She slowly rolled down her window. Two imposing figures emerged from the patrol car. Two white officers. One was tall and burly, his face set in a look of ingrained superiority. The other, shorter, had shifty, insolent eyes that raked over her as if she were something beneath contempt. Not a word of greeting, not a polite request for her license and registration. The taller officer, Miller, growled, his voice heavy and grating, like stone on stone. "Run a red light, huh? You people think the law don't apply at night?" Maya tried to remain calm, her voice soft but laced with a bewildered fear. "Sir, the light was still yellow when I went through." The shorter officer, Davis, leaned in close. His breath, stale with the smell of cigarettes, fanned across Maya's face. His face was inches from hers. "Y'all black kids learning to talk back now, huh?" He sneered, a contemptuous smirk twisting his lips. That moment, that very moment, any fragile defense Maya had within her shattered. Her breath came in short, ragged gasps. Her heart hammered against her ribs, threatening to break free. She bit down hard on her lip, trying to still the tremors that were coursing through her body. She hadn't even had time to react. The car door was yanked open with brutal force.
Both Miller and Davis grabbed her. They dragged her out of the car. The pull was so violent, Maya felt as if her arm was about to be dislocated. "Where's your purse? Give it here!" one of them yelled, his voice drowning out the rustle of zippers as they rummaged through her small handbag. Maya gasped for air. She tried to say something, tried to explain. But before she could utter a word, her wrists were wrenched behind her back. An icy, sickening chill shot through her as the cold metal of handcuffs bit gracious into her delicate skin. "Stay still, you resisting arrest!" one of them roared, as if she had just detonated a bomb. Then, suddenly, without warning, a fist, Miller's fist, big and hard as a rock, slammed into Maya's left cheek. A dry, sickening thwack echoed in the night. Her head snapped back, hitting the car door frame. The world per her eyes went dark for a terrifying second. Excruciating pain exploded in her skull. Before she could even register it, another blow, this time from Davis. His hand tangled violence in her thick hair, yanking her head back. Then he slammed her head against the cold, wet pavement. Thud. Maya didn't scream from the pain. The physical agony, as intense as it was, seemed to be overshadowed by a different kind of pain. A profound, soul-crushing sense of avarice and utter despair. Why? Why her? What had she done wrong? I didn't do anything. I didn't. She tried to cry out, but her throat was dry and raw. Her face was pressed hard against the rough concrete. Her forehead throbbed. Her lips were split and bleeding. She could smell her own blood, metallic, hot, and humiliating. They didn't stop immediately. One of them, probably Miller, yelled again, his voice dripping with a perverse satisfaction. "I told you to stop, you bitch!" The other one, Davis, stood there, and he laughed, a short, derisive cackle, a laugh devoid of any shred of humanity. No one intervened. The street remained eerily silent. No one ran to check if she had a weapon, if she was a threat. Because they didn't need a reason. Everything, it seemed, had been decided the moment the headlights of their patrol car had illuminated her brown skin. Maya lay there, motionless. Blood from the gash on her forehead seeped into her hair, mixing with the dirt on the sidewalk. Officer Davis snickered again, his voice thick with a sickening pleasure. "Another one. I bet she'll keep her mouth shut after this."
Miller chuckled along. "She's already shut. Can't say much now, can she?" They laughed as if it were all a hilarious joke, some sick form of entertainment on a dreary, rainy night. They showed no signs of apprehension or fear. They didn't try to avoid any street security cameras, if any were even working in this god-forsaken corner of Oakhaven. They didn't cover their faces. They knew, or at least they believed, that no one would care, that no one would investigate. A black girl beaten up in a poor neighborhood on a rainy night. That story would never make the papers. Or, if it did, it would be a single, emotionless line. Black teen arrested for non-compliance with police orders. And then, everything would be forgotten. Maya closed her eyes. Tears finally began to stream down, mingling with the blood and rainwater on her cheeks. In that moment, she wasn't thinking about the law. She wasn't thinking about who would protect her. In her mind, only one thought flickered, distant and faint, like a final, desperate ember of hope. Her father's words. Marcus Hawk Johnson. The father she loved and respected with all her heart. A legend of the Delta Force. He had once told her, his voice deep and reassuring, "Daughter, if anything ever happens to you, if you get into trouble, the most important thing is to survive. The rest, you leave to me." She had never imagined that day would come so soon, so painfully, so cruelly. And she didn't know that, in another part of this city of Oakhaven, her father, Marcus, had just jolted awake from a fitful sleep. The phone beside his bed was vibrating, a relentless buzz. The screen displayed an unknown number. The clock read exactly 11:42 p.m. That fateful night had only just begun. Marcus Hawk Johnson didn't remember when he drifted off. The basketball game on TV was still droning on, somewhere in the second quarter, the commentator's voice just low enough to lull a man into that hazy space between dreaming and waking. His old t-shirt clung to his back with a film of sweat, and the small house was dimly lit only by the flickering glow of the screen. Outside, the March wind was cold and dry, rustling through the unkempt grass in the backyard with a sound like someone whispering secrets. Then the phone rang. The first vibration didn't stir him, but the second, then the third, and finally the sight of an unfamiliar number calling at this ungodly hour snapped him fully awake. 20 years in the SEALs, and never once had a midnight call brought good news. He answered, instincts he'd kept leashed since retirement suddenly flaring up like a door blown off its hinges. A woman's voice, clear, professional, trying very hard to maintain composure. "Mr. Johnson, this is Officer Mendez from the Oakhaven Police Department. Your daughter, Maya, she's been assaulted during a traffic stop. She's being treated at Memorial Hospital." Marcus didn't hear the rest. Just those 3 words. Been assaulted. His throat went dry. His entire body tensed, as if he'd taken a bullet but was still standing. No clear images formed in his mind, just a sickening, hollow void. He didn't shout, didn't curse. He just sat there, a statue carved from a father's worst nightmare. "Is she conscious?" he finally managed, his voice so small it didn't sound like his own.
When we arrived on scene, she was responsive. The paramedics are treating her and transporting her now. You should come as soon as you can." He hung up. No thank you. No more questions. The next move required no thought. Marcus rose without turning on a single light, his feet finding familiar paths through the darkened house, grabbing his jacket, keys already in his pocket. No wallet, no shoes, no locking the door behind him. The house, in that instant, ceased to be a home. It reverted to its truest form, a temporary shelter. The only thing he carried, the same way he'd carried it into every God-forsaken hot zone, was his breath. Short, steady. The only thing that keeps you alive when the rounds are already chambered. He was at his truck in seconds, the door closing with a quiet thud. The cold air bit at his face, but Marcus felt nothing. The engine turned over on the first try, the only piece of luck that night. On the drive to Memorial, every streetlight, every turn was a blur, passing too quickly to register. Marcus didn't count how many red lights he ran, how many cars he forced to swerve. He didn't care if he got pulled over. The police had already beaten his daughter. What was left to be polite about? It was only when he neared Maple Street, where the flashing lights of an ambulance pulsed against the darkness, that one hand released its death grip on the steering wheel. That hand clenched into a fist, trembling, not from fear, but from a rage so profound it was almost a physical entity. But his eyes remained dry. No tears, no panic. Just one thought, louder than any siren, louder than any voice. They touched Maya. And they think I hung up my operator's badge on some wall when it's still etched in my goddamn blood. He wrenched the truck around the corner. The vehicle was still rocking from the hard brake when he threw open the door and leaped out. Every movement was fueled by a primal, anachronistic instinct. The police had cordoned off both ends of the intersection, but no yellow tape, no uniformed officer could stop a man whose gaze was as sharp and unyielding as a newly honed blade. No uniform, no badge on his chest, no questions asked, no ID required. Just a gait that didn't deviate an inch, a back as straight as it had been under a tactical pack, and a stare that was as focused as a rifle scope, enough to make every officer on duty instinctively step aside. Marcus didn't scream her name. He didn't wail or lose his composure. But each step he took was like a nail driving itself into the minds of those present. Maya. She was on a temporary gurney, set up under a lone, flickering streetlight, the ambulance parked haphazardly further down the block. Her small frame was covered by a thin blanket, but her face? Marcus almost didn't recognize his own daughter. Her left cheek was a swollen, grotesque map of purple and black, stretching all the way to her temple. Her right eye was puffed shut.
The corner of her mouth was split, dried blood forming jagged lines against her brown skin. Skin that just yesterday had been smiling at him through the kitchen window, now looked like a canvas of violence. Her hands were crudely bandaged. Her wrists bore the deep, angry welts of handcuffs, not like metal restraints, but as if someone had viciously cinched a chain around her arms. Her hair was a mess. The neat braids her mother, Shirley, had done over the weekend were undone, matted with blood and dirt, a mirror of how this girl, this ordinary, beautiful girl, had been targeted. Marcus slowed his pace. He could hear his own breathing, heavy, like the days he'd worn an oxygen tank on a deep dive. He didn't feel the cold, though the March wind was whipping at his neck. Every other sense was drowned out by something else, a cold, dizzying rage. Not the hot, explosive kind. This was the smoldering, battlefield kind, the one you find when you discover a teammate's body after an ambush. Maya. His voice was so low it was barely a whisper, as if speaking any louder might shatter what little was left. His hand reached for hers, and instantly he felt a chill that no child should ever have after the first spring of their life. She tried to open her eyes. One lid remained stubbornly closed, but the other, even though it only managed a tiny slit, was enough for her to see her father's face. There was no one else important enough for her to expend her last reserves of strength to see. Her lips trembled, and from her parched throat a few broken words escaped. They laughed. Daddy, they laughed." Marcus squeezed her hand gently, almost unconsciously, partly to reassure her he was there, partly to stop himself from making any sound at all. He had read hundreds of after-action reports, witnessed the aftermath of countless battles, but he had never seen a beaten body that didn't ignite immediate vocal fury in him. Only this suffocating silence. Maya, 17, her youth stolen by fists and the laughter of men paid to protect. And they'd done it as if it were just another Tuesday. They didn't know they'd picked the wrong target, the wrong man, the wrong night, the wrong damn family. And Marcus, though he hadn't uttered a single word of threat, had already started a countdown in his head, from that 11:42 p.m. phone call to the moment he would confront every single individual connected to this night. Maya didn't say much more. No one asked her to. Her body had already spoken volumes. Every bruise, every abrasion, every swollen patch of skin was like a misquoted excerpt from an official report no one would bother to write truthfully. Marcus sat there, his eyes locked on her as the paramedics worked quietly around her. One of them, a Latina woman with a closed-off but not unkind face, glanced at him for a long moment. She gave the slightest, almost imperceptible nod. To many, it would have meant nothing, but Marcus understood. It was her only way of confirming. Everything you're thinking, it's true.
No report would ever capture the smell of fresh blood. No camera could ever record the look in a 17-year-old girl's eyes as she's being pummeled on a public street. But Marcus didn't need any of that to know the truth. He only needed Maya's ragged breathing, the way her fingers curled in pain, the choked sobs that escaped her lips. Every sound, every movement, every look was being recorded in his mind like internal surveillance footage. Not for sentiment, for action. When the ambulance doors closed, Marcus stepped in behind. No one tried to stop him, not because they knew who he was, but because no one could have stood in that man's way at that moment. He sat on the bench beside her, buckled the seatbelt as a reflex, then gently took Evelyn's left hand in his.
It was small and swollen. He touched her so lightly, almost not at all, but enough for her to feel anchored, however minutely, in this chaos. They said I was resisting arrest." Her voice was like torn paper in the wind. "I didn't do anything. I was following the rules, but when I cried out, they just hit me harder." Marcus didn't push, didn't ask for more, didn't need the details, because it was all too brutally clear. The way Maya whispered, the way she still tried to choose her words carefully, as if she had to prove her innocence. That was the most brutal part of all. He squeezed her hand again, not to soothe, but to say without words, "I know, I hear you. I will forget nothing." This wasn't gentle sympathy. This was the kind of attention only found among battlefield survivors, when nothing is said, but everything is recorded at the deepest level. And Marcus was recording every breath, every blood-soaked testimony, to do something with it. From that moment on, Marcus knew he was no longer the man he thought he'd become. Not the retired vet tending his backyard, not the stay-at-home dad shuttling his kid to school, not the man who had accepted that justice was someone else's job. Once again, he felt his body shift, heartbeat steadying, breath deepening, thoughts sharpening like an unsheathed blade. His old unit had a name for this state: action mode. But this time, there were no topographical maps, no guerrilla fighters, no enemy with a clear face. This time, the target was a system that knew the law, but laughed while it broke it. Marcus didn't need to scream, didn't need to recriminate, didn't need a movie montage speech. He just needed one sentence, echoing in his head, enough to shake the foundations of a system that once stood so tall. "They didn't just hit my daughter. They picked the wrong man to do it to." 2 days later, before the sun had even thought about painting the Oakhaven sky, while a thin, ghostly mist still clung to the streets, Marcus stood before the Oakhaven Police Department headquarters. He wore his usual quiet demeanor, but his eyes, they were different. They held the glint of a freshly sharpened knife. He filed the official complaint, his voice steady, betraying none of the inferno raging within. He requested the case file, the dash cam and body cam footage, and the identities of the 3 officers present that night: Miller, Davis, and the third one, the one who'd watched, Ray Carter. The desk sergeant, a man whose face seemed permanently etched with a mixture of boredom and cynicism, took the papers with a grunt. "Someone'll call you," he mumbled, already turning back to his lukewarm coffee. Marcus didn't budge. "I also want to view the body-worn camera footage from those 3 officers." His tone was polite but firm, an iron will wrapped in calm. He was directed upstairs, to the Office of Internal Affairs. The sign on the door was faded, the paint chipped. Inside, a man named Kowalski, head of Internal Affairs, sat behind a cluttered desk. He had the tired, jaded look of someone who'd seen too much and believed too little. His tie was stained with old coffee. After a cursory glance at Marcus's complaint, Kowalski delivered the news with a practiced, almost bored indifference. "I'm sorry, Mr. Johnson. According to our technical department, all 3 body-worn cameras from that shift experienced a technical malfunction. There are no usable recordings." Marcus stared directly into Kowalski's eyes, searching for a flicker, a tell, anything. "All 3? On the same night? That's quite a coincidence, wouldn't you say, Mr. Kowalski?" Kowalski's gaze shifted, avoiding Marcus's direct stare. He mumbled something about the unreliability of technology, about unfortunate glitches. But Marcus knew. He'd seen this exact brand of systemic amnesia before. In war-torn countries where inconvenient truths and inconvenient bodies had a habit of disappearing just when they were most needed. This was the official Stonewall, the first layer of the fortress he now had to breach. He left Kowalski's office, the air inside feeling thick and suffocating, not from a lack of oxygen, but from an abundance of unspoken lies. As he descended the worn, creaking stairs, a movement caught his eye. Leaning against the metal railing near the security checkpoint was a young officer, Ray Carter, the third man from that horrific night. Carter wasn't looking at him with fear or even disdain. He was looking at Marcus with a strange, almost knowing half-smile. It wasn't a friendly smile, nor was it entirely mocking. It was the look of someone who understood the futility of challenging the machine. Someone who had perhaps seen this play out many times before, and knew how the script usually ended for those who dared to question. Their eyes met for a brief, charged moment. Carter didn't flinch. He just held that enigmatic look, then slowly turned and walked away, disappearing down a hallway, leaving Marcus with an even deeper sense of unease and a chilling premonition that the walls of silence in Oakhaven were built higher and thicker than he could have ever imagined. Marcus didn't give up. He wouldn't. He couldn't. He remembered an old Delta Force brother, Leo "Ghost" Maxwell, a bona fide tech wizard, a digital phantom who could slip through firewalls like smoke. After his service, Leo had gone off-grid, maintaining contact with only a handful of trusted souls. Marcus was one of them. He found Leo in a small, unassuming house on the outskirts of Oakhaven, a place humming with the quiet thrum of high-powered electronics. Wires snaked across the floor like metallic vines, and multiple monitors cast an eerie blue glow in the dim light. Marcus laid out the story of Maya, his voice low and gravelly, each word heavy with a father's pain. Leo, a man of few words, his eyes constantly scanning, a habit ingrained from years of looking for threats both digital and physical, just listened, intently. When Marcus finished, Leo gave a single decisive nod. "I'm in." No dramatic pronouncements, no empty promises. Just the unshakable bond of brotherhood, forged in crucibles Marcus didn't even want to revisit. In Leo's makeshift command center, amidst the organized chaos of motherboards, hard drives, and flickering screens, they got to work. Leo, with fingers that danced across keyboards like a concert pianist, began to probe Oakhaven's municipal traffic surveillance system, bypassing official channels with an ease that was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. He was looking for something specific, a digital breadcrumb. And he found it. Buried deep within the archives, mislabeled and almost overlooked, was the footage from the traffic camera at the intersection where Maya had been pulled over. The video was grainy, the lighting poor, but it was clear enough to confirm one crucial, damning fact. Maya Johnson had not run a red light. The footage unequivocally showed her car passing through the intersection while the light was still a solid, undeniable yellow. The entire premise for the traffic stop, the catalyst for the brutality that followed, was a fabrication, a lie. Marcus's fist clenched, knuckles white. The first piece of the puzzle had fallen into place. This wasn't just a random act of police overreach. This was premeditated, built on a foundation of deceit. Leo, however, wasn't done. His instincts, honed by years of digital warfare, told him there was more. He delved deeper into the Oakhaven PD's internal network, navigating the labyrinthine pathways of their servers. And then he found it, something far more sinister. The access logs for the body-worn camera system showed an unusual and highly suspicious pattern of activity. Shortly after Maya's assault, a high-level administrative account, identified only as FRY admin, had accessed the specific files related to the officers involved. There were clear indicators of file tampering, of data being altered, or, more likely, erased. Someone, somewhere within the department, was actively trying to bury the truth, to scrub away the evidence of their officers' savagery. The silence Marcus had encountered wasn't just incompetence. It was a deliberate, calculated cover-up. The fight had just gotten a whole lot dirtier. Marcus and Leo, fueled by a potent cocktail of righteous anger and black coffee, worked relentlessly, the glow of multiple monitors reflecting in their determined eyes. Leo unleashed a custom-built algorithm, a sophisticated digital bloodhound designed to sift through mountains of Oakhaven PD's incident reports, archive data, and fragmented digital remnants, the digital ghosts of cases long buried or intentionally obscured. Slowly, painstakingly, a chilling pattern began to emerge from the noise. Over the preceding 18 months, there were no less than 17 documented incidents where officers' body-worn cameras had mysteriously malfunctioned. These malfunctions had an uncanny knack for occurring specifically during encounters that involved the use of force or resulted in citizen complaints of misconduct. And within that subset of 17, the names of Officer Miller and Officer Davis surfaced with an alarming, undeniable frequency. They often patrolled together, a grim duo. Their official reports detailing these camera failures were eerily similar, almost a carbon copy of each other, littered with identical, carefully chosen phrases. Subject became non-compliant. Situation escalated rapidly. Equipment experienced an unforeseen technical issue. It was a script, polished and rehearsed.
Leo, his fingers a blur across the keyboard, dug deeper into Miller and Davis's digital footprints. Their personnel files, or what little he could access through back channels, painted an even darker picture. Both officers had a string of prior civilian complaints lodged against them, overwhelmingly from black residents, alleging excessive force and racial profiling. And, predictably, every single one of those complaints had been dismissed, unsubstantiated due to lack of evidence or witness credibility issues. The system was protecting its own. The aha moment, the one that sent a jolt of cold fury through both Marcus and Leo, came when Leo unearthed a fragmented audio file. It was buried deep within the cache of an old decommissioned server, poor quality, almost unintelligible. But after hours of meticulous cleaning and enhancement, a voice emerged, raspy and arrogant. It was unmistakably Miller's. He was speaking to a younger officer, likely Davis in his rookie days. "Just write it up like always, kid," Miller was saying. "Subject resisted. Standard procedure. I'll handle the rest." Marcus stared at the photos of Miller and Davis they'd pinned to a makeshift whiteboard. Miller's cold, dead-eyed stare. Davis's smug, self-satisfied smirk. These weren't isolated incidents of bad apples. This was a rot that had spread, a predatory pack operating with impunity, shielded by the very system they were sworn to uphold. The silence wasn't just a cover-up, it was a hunting ground. Marcus couldn't shake the image of the young officer, Ray Carter, and that strange knowing look he'd given him at the precinct. There was something in Carter's eyes, a flicker of unease, maybe even a hint of conscience, that set him apart from the cold indifference of Kowalski or the thuggish arrogance of Miller and Davis. He decided to take a chance, a long shot, banking on the hope that Carter's soul hadn't yet been entirely consumed by the darkness of Oakhaven PD. Arranging a meeting was a delicate dance of coded messages and discrete locations. They finally met in a dimly lit, out-of-the-way coffee shop, the kind of place where conversations could be had without attracting unwanted attention. Marcus didn't come on strong, no threats, no pleas. He simply placed 2 items on the worn Formica tabletop between them. A cherished photograph of Maya, radiant and smiling, taken just weeks before the assault, and a printout of the traffic camera footage, irrefutable proof of her innocence. "You were there, Carter," Marcus said, his voice low and steady, but carrying the weight of a father's grief. "You didn't lay a hand on her, I know that, but you didn't stop them either. You saw what they did." Carter flinched, his eyes darting around the coffee shop, as if expecting Miller and Davis to materialize from the shadows. He stammered about his career, about the risks, the unspoken rules of the Blue Brotherhood. Marcus let him talk, then cut through the fear with a quiet intensity. "I understand the price of doing the right thing, son. Believe me, I do. But the price of silence? That's a hell of a lot steeper. You don't just lose your job, you lose yourself." The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. For days, Carter wrestled with his conscience, the image of Maya's battered face and Marcus's unwavering gaze haunting his waking hours and his fitful sleep. Finally, unable to bear the weight of his complicity any longer, he reached out. In a hushed, clandestine meeting, the truth, or at least a significant piece of it, came tumbling out. Carter recounted the horrific details of that night, Miller's unhinged aggression, Davis's sadistic cruelty. But more importantly, he exposed the unofficial protocol that permeated Oakhaven PD, the way reports were routinely sanitized, how inconvenient evidence had a habit of disappearing, and the shadowy figure who orchestrated it all, Lieutenant Riggs. Riggs, Carter explained, was the department's go-to cleaner, a master manipulator notorious for making internal affairs investigations vanish and complaints against favored officers evaporate. And Riggs, Carter revealed with a tremor in his voice, was the one who had given Miller and Davis the green light, an implicit order to teach that girl a lesson after word had gotten out that Maya was involved with a student group protesting the department's aggressive policing tactics in black neighborhoods. Then Carter dropped a bombshell. The complete, unedited body cam footage, if Riggs hadn't already managed to permanently destroy it, might still exist. It was likely stored on a little-known off-network backup server, a digital vault that required special high-level clearance to access. A server Riggs himself often used, exploiting a known security flaw to access and delete sensitive data without leaving a clear digital trail. A sliver of hope, but one wrapped in immense danger. The path to the unvarnished truth was now clearer, but it was also leading them directly into the lion's den. Carter's intel, a fragile thread of hope, led Marcus and Leo down another rabbit hole, this one pointing towards a name whispered in hushed tones within the Oakhaven PD grapevine, Mrs. Henderson. She was the former head of personnel records, a black woman who had dedicated decades to the department before her abrupt, almost mysterious retirement a few years prior. Rumor had it she'd left not because she was tired, but because she could no longer stomach the stench of corruption she was forced to navigate daily. Marcus found Mrs. Henderson living in a small, neat-as-a-pin house in a quiet, older neighborhood. She was an elder, her face etched with the wisdom and weariness of a life lived with eyes wide open, her gaze sharp and discerning. Initially, she was guarded, her posture radiating a polite but firm no trespassers vibe. But as Marcus, with quiet dignity, recounted Maya's ordeal and laid out the evidence he and Leo had painstakingly gathered, the defensive walls around Mrs. Henderson slowly began to crumble. The pain in his voice, the unwavering resolve in his eyes, resonated with a part of her she thought she had long since buried. With a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of years, Mrs. Henderson began to speak. She confirmed Carter's story about Lieutenant Riggs and his enablers, including the now distant head of internal affairs, Kowalski. She'd tried to blow the whistle on numerous instances during her tenure, only to be met with veiled threats, bureaucratic stonewalling, and a chilling pressure to look the other way, all orchestrated by Riggs and his superiors. But Mrs. Henderson was no fool. Before she'd walked out that precinct door for the last time, she'd made quiet, meticulous copies of sensitive documents, a personal life insurance policy, as she called it, tucked away for a day she hoped would never come, but was always prepared for.
From a locked, unassuming file cabinet, she produced a treasure trove, an unofficial Oakhaven PD organizational chart, one that didn't just show job titles, but mapped out the hidden tendrils of influence, the shadow network of cleaners and enforcers, and the intricate ways Lieutenant Riggs manipulated the system to his advantage. More critically, she knew about the off-network backup server Carter had mentioned. She knew Riggs's habits, his preferred backdoors, the specific security flaw he often exploited to access and erase data, believing his digital footprints were untraceable. "They're not afraid of evidence, Mr. Johnson," Mrs. Henderson said, her voice low but laced with a steely bitterness. "They're afraid of anything that makes people question the system. And Riggs is the guardian of that silence. He's the one who ensures the questions are never asked too loudly." She then provided them with the crucial technical details, the subtle system vulnerabilities, and the likely access protocols Riggs employed. It was the key they desperately needed, a roadmap into the heart of the beast's digital lair. Mrs. Henderson wasn't just giving them information, she was arming them for a different kind of war. Armed with the critical intel from Carter and the invaluable insights from Mrs. Henderson, Marcus and Leo knew what they had to do. The next step was perilous, a high-stakes gamble against a system designed to protect its own. They had to breach the Oakhaven PD's off-network backup server. One wrong move, one digital misstep, and not only would their entire investigation crumble, but they'd find themselves on the wrong side of the law, facing the full, vindictive wrath of Riggs and his cronies. Leo, using Mrs. Henderson's schematics and the security vulnerabilities she'd painstakingly detailed, began to map out a remote infiltration plan. It was a complex, multi-layered approach designed to mimic Riggs's own backdoor methods, a digital ghost slipping through digital cracks. He also prepared a contingency, a far riskier physical access plan, just in case the remote attempt failed. The night of the operation was thick with a tense, electric anticipation. Rain lashed against the windows of Leo's makeshift command center, mirroring the storm brewing within Marcus. While Leo's fingers flew across multiple keyboards, a symphony of clicks and keystrokes, Marcus stood as a silent sentinel, every nerve ending on high alert, ready for any sign of trouble, any indication that their digital intrusion had been detected. It was a grueling race against the clock. They knew Riggs was a paranoid, cunning operator. If he caught even the slightest whiff of suspicion, he wouldn't hesitate to order a complete wipe of the backup server, erasing Maya's truth and the truth of countless others forever. Hours bled into each other. Leo navigated through layers of outdated security protocols, bypassed anemic firewalls, and sidestepped digital tripwires, his focus absolute. Marcus watched the progress bars crawl across the screens, each percentage point gained a small victory, each unexpected delay a jolt of anxiety. Then, after what felt like an eternity, a breakthrough. Leo's face, previously a mask of intense concentration, flickered with a grim triumph. "I'm in," he breathed, the words barely a whisper. He'd found it. The segregated partition on the backup server where Riggs squirreled away sensitive files, the digital graveyard where inconvenient truths went to die. And there, amongst the archive data, was a folder, time-stamped from the night of Maya's assault. With trembling hands but a steely resolve, they opened a video file. The quality wasn't pristine, the lighting was poor, but it was undeniably, horrifyingly clear. The entire brutal assault on Maya Johnson, captured not by one, but by two of the officers' body cams, footage that Kowalski had claimed didn't exist due to technical malfunctions. Miller's savage blows, Davis's sneering taunts, their chilling, dehumanizing laughter. And, most importantly, the footage showed Maya, her hands clearly visible, making no aggressive moves, offering no resistance, even as the first punch landed. It was a raw, unedited testament to her innocence and their depravity. Leo, his jaw tight with fury, began a rapid download, not just of Maya's files, but of every other suspicious incident report and associated video file linked to Miller, Davis, and the insidious tendrils of Lieutenant Riggs' influence. The dam had broken. The irrefutable, unvarnished truth was finally in their possession. Lieutenant Riggs was no fool. He was a creature of the shadows, a predator who'd thrived for years by anticipating threats and neutralizing them with ruthless efficiency. The subtle ripples of Marcus's investigation, perhaps a careless word from a spooked Carter, or, more likely, Riggs' own network of informants sniffing out trouble, had reached him. He sensed the encroaching danger, the tightening of a noose he couldn't quite see but could definitely feel. And Riggs, true to his nature, decided to strike first, to send a message, brutal and unambiguous. He unleashed his hounds, a specialized, off-the-books unit of Oakhaven PD's most thuggish and morally bankrupt officers. The ones Riggs kept on a short leash for exactly these kinds of dirty work assignments. Their orders were clear: find Marcus Johnson, deliver a warning, and, if possible, destroy any evidence he might have accumulated. The attack came on a moonless night. Marcus was in his small auto repair shop, the one place he still felt a semblance of normalcy, meticulously organizing the downloaded files, cross-referencing data, building his case brick by painful brick. The first indication of trouble was a flicker of movement outside, then the crunch of gravel. Before he could react, the shop door burst inward. It wasn't an arrest. It was an ambush. They came in hard and fast, a wave of dark figures. Marcus, his Delta Force training kicking in with the speed of instinct, met them head-on. The cluttered workshop, filled with tools and engine parts, became an improvised battlefield. He moved with a lethal grace, a whirlwind of controlled fury, using wrenches as bludgeons, oil cans as projectiles. He took down two of them quickly, their surprised yelps cut short by precise, incapacitating blows. But they were many, and he was one. A heavy blow from a concealed baton caught him silo on the ribs, stealing his breath. Another slammed into his shoulder, sending a jolt of white-hot pain through his arm. They weren't trying to kill him, not yet. They were trying to break him, to instill a primal fear. And they were after the evidence. One of them, a hulking brute with a shaved head, lunged for the laptop where Marcus had been working. Marcus, despite his injuries, threw himself in the way, a desperate, protective roar tearing from his throat. In the chaotic melee, as Marcus grappled with two of them, the shaved-headed thug managed to smash the laptop against a workbench, the screen shattering into a spiderweb of broken glass. A wave of despair threatened to engulf Marcus, but the fight wasn't over. He fought with the ferocity of a cornered lion, fueled by love for his daughter and a burning need for justice. Then, one of the attackers, pinned beneath Marcus's knee, his face contorted in pain and rage, snarled, his voice a venomous hiss. "You keep messin' with Riggs, Johnson, and that little girl of yours, she ain't gonna be so lucky next time." The words hit Marcus harder than any physical blow. This wasn't just a warning to him anymore. This was a direct, unequivocal threat against Maya. They were escalating. They were demonstrating that their reach was long, their cruelty boundless. The fight in the workshop was no longer just about exposing past crimes. It was now a desperate battle to protect his daughter from a very real and present danger, a danger orchestrated by a man who clearly had no limits. The stakes had just been raised to an unbearable, terrifying new level. The brutal assault in his workshop, the chilling threat against Maya, was a grim anointment. Marcus knew then, with a certainty that settled like ice in his veins, that he could no longer keep Maya at home, a sitting duck for Riggs' escalating savagery. The fight had moved beyond digital forensics and quiet investigations. This was now a war for survival, and he needed to get his daughter off the board. He gathered his small, trusted circle: Leo, his digital ghost; Ray Carter, the young officer whose conscience had finally outweighed his fear; and the indomitable Mrs. Henderson, the keeper of Oakhaven PD's darkest secrets. Together, in the hushed, tense atmosphere of Leo's secure workspace, they hatched a daring, desperate plan. They wouldn't just defend, they would attack. They would lure Riggs and his key enforcers into a trap, a place where their arrogance and overconfidence would become their undoing. Their chosen battleground was House Zero, an abandoned 3-story shell of a building in a derelict industrial park on the forgotten fringes of Oakhaven. It was a ghost on the city's grid, no active surveillance, no prying eyes. Perfect. Leo, with his usual meticulous genius, transformed the decaying structure into a sophisticated, covert recording studio. Micro cameras, smaller than a fingernail, were concealed in crumbling plaster. Directional microphones, disguised as debris, were strategically placed. Every angle, every whisper would be captured, relayed in real time to a secure, off-site server Leo controlled. Mrs. Henderson, her courage a quiet inferno, volunteered for the most dangerous role: the bait. She would reach out to Riggs using a carefully crafted story, hinting that she possessed even more damaging evidence than previously thought, evidence directly implicating him in a web of corruption far beyond the Miller and Davis beatings. She would suggest a discreet meeting at House Zero to negotiate a deal, to ensure her safety. Riggs, blinded by his own perceived invincibility and desperate to control the narrative, took the bait. He couldn't resist the urge to personally handle this potential threat, to silence Mrs. Henderson once and for all. He agreed to the meeting, and, true to his thuggish nature, he brought his muscle. Miller and Davis, the two officers who had brutalized Maya, their presence a grotesque display of Riggs's power and contempt. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, eerie shadows across the desolate industrial park, Riggs, Miller, and Davis swaggered into House Zero. The air crackled with unspoken menace. Mrs. Henderson, seated at a rickety table, appeared frail, but her eyes held an unyielding resolve. The negotiation began.
Riggs, oozing a chilling confidence, laid out his terms, which were less a negotiation and more a series of thinly veiled threats. Then, prodded by Mrs. Henderson's feigned fear and carefully planted questions, Miller and Davis, puffed up with their own importance and Riggs's anointing presence, began to boast. They recounted, with sickening relish, not only the assault on Maya. "That little bitch learned her lesson," Miller sneered, but also alluded to other incidents, other times they had handled situations, other victims silenced by their fists and the department's protective shield. Riggs, a puppet master pleased with his marionettes, interjected occasionally, confirming details, implicitly admitting his role, the orchestrator, the one who pulled the strings, the one who ensured the silence. Every incriminating word, every boastful admission, every vile threat was being captured, transmitted, recorded. Then, just as Riggs was leaning in, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper as he detailed what would happen to Mrs. Henderson if she didn't comply, the shadows in the doorway shifted. Marcus Hawk Johnson, a figure of pure, contained fury, stepped into the dim light. Beside him, no longer a hesitant observer, but a man who had finally chosen his side, stood Officer Ray Carter, his face grim, his hand resting near his holstered service weapon, not as a threat, but as a symbol of a line finally drawn.
The trap had been sprung. The hunters had become the hunted. The silence of House Zero was about to be shattered by a reckoning that had been a long, painful time coming. This wasn't just about evidence anymore. This was about a father's promise, a community's outrage, and the unyielding demand for an end to the reign of terror that had gripped Oakhaven for far too long. The recordings from House Zero, a raw, unvarnished testament to the corruption festering within Oakhaven PD, were explosive. Leo, working with swift precision, didn't just save the files, he weaponized them. Encrypted and anonymized, they were dispatched through secure channels, landing simultaneously in the inboxes of a tenacious investigative journalist known for taking down Goliaths, and directly onto the servers of the FBI's Civil Rights Division. The fuse had been lit. The Oakhaven scandal erupted onto the national stage with the force of a Category 5 hurricane. The journalist's exposé, featuring damning excerpts from the recordings, hit the morning news cycle like a battering ram. The public outcry was immediate and overwhelming. Hashtags demanding #Justice for Maya and #CleanUp Oakhaven PD trended for days. Protests, initially small and localized, swelled into massive demonstrations that choked the streets outside City Hall and the Oakhaven Police Department. A vibrant tapestry of black, white, and brown faces united in their demand for accountability. The FBI, armed with the irrefutable evidence from House Zero and pressured by the relentless public furor, launched a full-scale federal investigation. One by one, the pillars of Riggs's corrupt empire began to crumble. Lieutenant Riggs, Officers Miller and Davis, Head of Internal Affairs Kowalski, and a slew of other officers implicated in the systemic abuse and cover-ups were arrested. Their perp walks broadcast live, a stark contrast to their previous swagger and impunity. Oakhaven PD was gutted, a long overdue purge of its most toxic elements. For Maya, the path to healing was long and arduous, a journey marked by both shadow and light. The physical scars faded, but the invisible wounds, the trauma etched into her soul, took time and immense courage to confront. Yet she was not alone. The outpouring of support from her community, the unwavering love of her father, and the knowledge that her ordeal had sparked a movement for change became her anchors. She found her voice, not in anger, but in a quiet, steely determination to ensure that no other young person in Oakhaven would endure what she had. She began speaking at community gatherings, her words resonating with a power and authenticity that belied her age, transforming her from a victim into a potent symbol of resilience and hope. Marcus, having fulfilled his promise, slowly began to shed the hardened exterior of Hawk. The relentless warrior who had waged a solitary war against a corrupt system gradually gave way to Marcus Johnson, the father, the mechanic, the man who had stared into the abyss and pulled his daughter and a piece of his city's soul back from the brink. The nightmares didn't vanish entirely, but they no longer held him captive. He found a new purpose, not in retribution, but in rebuilding.
Ray Carter, after providing crucial testimony to the FBI, resigned from the Oakhaven PD. The blue uniform no longer represented justice to him. He faced ostracism from some former colleagues, but he also found a newfound respect from a community that saw his courage. He started working with youth outreach programs, determined to bridge the chasm of mistrust between law enforcement and the people they were sworn to serve, trying to build something better from the ashes of the old. And Mrs. Henderson, watching the news reports of the arrests, a small, satisfied smile played on her lips. The secrets she had guarded for so long, the truths she had ached to reveal, had finally seen the light of day. Her quiet, decades-long resistance had, in the end, contributed to a seismic shift. The storm had passed, leaving behind a landscape forever changed, but also, for the first time in a long time in Oakhaven, a fragile, palpable sense of hope for a true, just dawn. 1 year later, Oakhaven wasn't the same city. The air, once thick with unspoken fear and simmering resentment, now held a tegitive lightness, the scent of change. The old, stained police headquarters, a symbol of Oakhaven's dark past, was undergoing a radical transformation, not just in bricks and mortar, but in ethos. A new police chief, an outsider with a proven track record in community policing and reform, was at the helm. Citizen oversight boards, once a distant dream, were now a reality, their meetings packed with engaged residents. Maya Johnson stood tall, no longer just a survivor, but a force. She'd found her calling, channeling her pain into purpose. She was a sought-after speaker, her voice echoing in high school auditoriums, community centers, and even the state capitol, urging young people to find their own power, to demand accountability, to never let their voices be silenced. Her story, once a whispered tragedy, had become an anthem of resilience, a beacon for Oakhaven's youth. She wasn't just telling her story, she was helping others write theirs. Marcus had traded the cold steel of his workshop tools, at least some of them, for the vibrant energy of a small community center he'd established in the heart of the East Side. He taught self-defense not as an act of aggression, but as an empowerment tool. He mentored at-risk youth, sharing life skills, offering a steady hand and a listening ear, the kind of presence that had been so absent for so many, for so long. The fierce warrior was still there, but now his battles were fought with compassion and a deep desire to nurture the next generation. He found a quiet joy in the laughter and hope that now filled a space once marked by neglect. Leo Ghost, ever the enigma, remained in the digital shadows, but his targets had shifted. He now lent his formidable skills to human rights organizations and independent journalists, a silent guardian angel for those fighting to expose injustice worldwide. He'd learned that the most powerful code wasn't the one that breached firewalls, but the one that unlocked human potential.
Marcus didn't scream her name. He didn't wail or lose his composure. But each step he took was like a nail driving itself into the minds of those present. Maya. She was on a temporary gurney, set up under a lone, flickering streetlight. The ambulance parked haphazardly further down the block. Her small frame was covered by a thin blanket, but her face? Marcus almost didn't recognize his own daughter. Her left cheek was a swollen, grotesque map of purple and black, stretching all the way to her temple. Her right eye was puffed shut. The corner of her mouth was split, dried blood forming jagged lines against her brown skin. Skin that just yesterday had been smiling at him through the kitchen window, now looked like a canvas of violence. Her hands were crudely bandaged. Her wrists bore the deep, angry welts of handcuffs, not like metal restraints, but as if someone had viciously cinched a chain around her arms. Her hair was a mess. The neat braids her mother, Shirley, had done over the weekend were undone, matted with blood and dirt. A mirror of how this girl, this ordinary, beautiful girl, had been targeted. Marcus slowed his pace. He could hear his own breathing, heavy, like the days he'd worn an oxygen tank on a deep dive. He didn't feel the cold, though the March wind was whipping at his neck. Every other sense was drowned out by something else, a cold, dizzying rage. Not the hot, explosive kind. This was the smoldering, battlefield kind, the one you find when you discover a teammate's body after an ambush. Maya. His voice was so low it was barely a whisper, as if speaking any louder might shatter what little was left. His hand reached for hers, and instantly he felt a chill that no child should ever have after the first spring of their life. She tried to open her eyes. One lid remained stubbornly closed, but the other, even though it only managed a tiny slit, was enough for her to see her father's face. There was no one else important enough for her to expend her last reserves of strength to see. Her lips trembled, and from her parched throat a few broken words escaped. They laughed. Daddy, they laughed. Marcus squeezed her hand gently, almost unconsciously, partly to reassure her he was there, partly to stop himself from making any sound at all. He had read hundreds of after-action reports detailing torture, witnessed the aftermath of countless battles, but he had never seen a beaten body that didn't ignite immediate vocal fury in him. Only this suffocating silence. Maya, 17, her youth stolen by fists and the laughter of men paid to protect. And they'd done it as if it were just another Tuesday. They didn't know they'd picked the wrong target, the wrong man, the wrong night, the wrong damn family. And Marcus, though he hadn't uttered a single word of threat, had already started a countdown in his head, from that 11:42 p.m. phone call to the moment he would confront every single individual connected to this night. Maya didn't say much more. No one asked her to. Her body had already spoken volumes. Every bruise, every abrasion, every swollen patch of skin was like a misquoted excerpt from an official report no one would bother to write truthfully. Marcus sat there, his eyes locked on her as the paramedics worked quietly around her. One of them, a Latina woman with a closed-off but not unkind face, glanced at him for a long moment. She gave the slightest, almost imperceptible nod. To many, it would have meant nothing, but Marcus understood. It was her only way of confirming. Everything you're thinking, it's true.
And the wall, the very spot on that desolate east side street where Maya's nightmare had begun, was no longer a monument to pain. It had been reclaimed, reborn.
A massive, vibrant mural now stretched across its length, a riot of color and life. It depicted a young black woman, her head held high, her eyes fixed on a dawning horizon, the rising sun casting a golden glow behind her. And beneath this powerful image, in bold, elegant script, were the words that had become Oakhaven's new mantra: "Our voices, our power." On this anniversary, Marcus and Maya stood before that mural. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves on the newly planted trees nearby. No grand speeches, no somber reflections, just a shared, quiet understanding. A soft smile touched Maya's lips, mirrored in her father's eyes. They had walked through the deepest, darkest valley, and they had emerged, not unscathed, but unbroken. Stronger, united. The echoes of that terrible night in Oakhaven would likely never fully fade. But now they were joined by new echoes. The echo of Maya's courageous voice. The echo of a community awakened. The echo of justice, however hard won, finally served. The fight was far from over, they knew that. But as they turned from the mural, ready to face whatever came next, they carried with them the unshakable truth that had been forged in their fire. That even in the deepest darkness, the smallest spark of courage, when fanned by love and a relentless pursuit of what's right, can ignite a flame powerful enough to illuminate the path towards a brighter, more just tomorrow. Oakhaven was listening, and its voice, at long last, was beginning to sing a new song. Maya's story, Marcus's fight. It's a testament, ain't it? A testament to the fire that burns in the belly of a father protecting his child. The unbreakable spirit of a young woman refusing to be defined by her scars. It's a reminder that the system, as mighty and as entrenched as it seems, ain't infallible. It can be challenged. It can be changed. But it takes guts. It takes truth. It takes us. We saw what happens when good people, pushed to the brink, decide enough is enough. We saw how one family's nightmare, amplified by courage, can shake the foundations of a city and demand a reckoning. The journey from victim to victor ain't never easy, but Maya walked it. Marcus paved it. And Oakhaven, well, Oakhaven will never be the same. If this story hit you, if it stirred something deep inside, if it made you think, then don't let that feeling fade. Share it. Let it ripple out. Because there's somebody out there, right now, who needs to hear that they ain't alone, that their fight matters. Hit that like button if you felt the power in their stand. And make sure you subscribe, because we got more stories like this, raw and real, voices that deserve to be heard, truths that need to be told. You don't want to miss what's coming. Leave a comment below. Let us know what part of Maya and Marcus's journey resonated with you. Your voice, your perspective, it matters. It could be the very thing someone else needs to read today to find their own strength. Because healing, true healing, it starts with the truth. And the truth, when it's shared, when it's amplified, it becomes a legacy. It becomes a weapon. It becomes the light that chases out the damn darkness. Thanks for watching. Remember this, sometimes the ones sworn to protect you are the very monsters you need protection from.